The stars had been quiet for 300 years. Across the galaxy, thousands of different alien species lived in peace under the protection of the Galactic Harmony Council. Trade ships moved freely between worlds, carrying goods and knowledge. Children of many species played together on space stations. Wars had become nothing more than old stories told by grandfathers. Commander Zethkar stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the peaceful stars through the large window. His blue skin gleamed under the soft lights, and his large eyes reflected the calm of deep space. As an Altarian, he had been born into this golden age of peace. His species had not fought a real war in over 2 centuries. The commander's peaceful thoughts were broken by a sharp alarm. Red lights began flashing across the bridge, and his crew rushed to their stations. The main screen lit up with incoming messages from the Outer Rim territories. "Sir," called his communications officer, her voice shaking, "we're getting emergency signals from the Keller system. They say they're under attack." Zethkar frowned. Pirates sometimes attacked Outer Rim colonies, but the Council's defense fleet always dealt with them quickly. "Patch me through to their defense coordinator." The screen flickered, then showed static. After a few moments, a terrified face appeared. It was Captain Mordok of the Keller Defense Station, his normally calm species now showing pure fear. "Commander Zethkar thanked the stars you received our signal. They came out of nowhere, ships like nothing we've ever seen. Our shields did nothing to stop them." "Slow down, Captain," Zethkar said. "What kind of ships? How many attackers?" "I don't know how many. Maybe 50, maybe 100. They're huge, angular things made of dark metal. No smooth curves like our ships. They look like they were built only for war. Commander, they're not trying to take prisoners or steal anything. They're just destroying everything." The screen shook as explosions rocked the defense station. "They don't respond to any communications. We tried everything. Different languages, mathematical sequences, even basic pictographs. Nothing. They just keep firing." Zethkar felt a cold fear growing in his chest. In 3 centuries of peace, no species had ever refused to communicate. Even the most primitive civilizations understood the basic desire to talk before fighting. "Captain, fall back to the inner system. We'll send reinforcements immediately." "There is no inner system anymore," Captain Mordok said quietly. "They hit the colonies first. 12 billion beings, Commander. All gone in less than 6 hours. Transmission cut to static. Zethkar stared at the blank screen for a long moment. His crew looked at him with confusion and growing fear. 12 billion beings dead in 6 hours. It was impossible. No known weapon could cause that much destruction so quickly. Shh. His tactical officer called out. "We're receiving similar reports from 4 other systems. The Velian colonies, the Thrus mining stations, New Kepler, and the Zephyr trade hub. All under attack by unknown hostiles." The commander's legs felt weak. 5 systems under attack at the same time meant this was not a random raid. This was a planned invasion by an enemy with resources the galaxy had never seen. Over the next 3 days, the reports kept coming. System after system went silent. The Council's defense fleets rushed to help, but they arrived too late every time. They found nothing but debris fields where thriving worlds had been. Billions of beings simply vanished, leaving behind only twisted metal and scattered asteroids. The few survivors who escaped told the same story. Dark, angular ships that seemed to absorb weapon fire without damage. Enemies who showed no interest in conquest or resources. They arrived, destroyed everything living, and moved on to the next target. Zethkar's own fleet had tried to engage the attackers at the Rigel system. His 20 ships equipped with the most advanced weapons the Council could provide had barely scratched the enemy's armor. In return, they had lost 6 vessels in the first 10 minutes of fighting. The commander had been forced to retreat, leaving another world to burn. Now he stood alone in his private quarters, looking at an ancient star chart that had been stored in the ship's archives for centuries. Most of the galaxy's civilizations knew the basic layout of local space, but this chart showed regions that had been marked as forbidden or dangerous. At the edge of known space, far from the civilized core worlds, was a small yellow star with several planets. One of them was marked in red with a simple note: "Quarantine world, do not approach inhabitants, extremely dangerous." Every child in the galaxy had heard stories about the Death World. It was said to be a planet so hostile that its native species had evolved into something beyond normal understanding. The stories claimed that these humans had turned their entire world into a fortress, and that they fought wars so brutal that the Council had declared them too dangerous for contact. Most adults dismissed these as children's tales, species that violent could never survive long enough to develop space travel. They would destroy themselves first. But as Zethkar looked at his tactical reports, showing enemy ships that shrugged off the galaxy's best weapons, he began to wonder if the stories might be true. If there really was a species out there that had evolved to fight and survive against impossible odds. His hands shook as he activated the ship's long-range communications array. He had never used the emergency protocols before. They were designed to send signals across vast distances to request help from anyone who might be listening. The message would take days to reach the coordinates marked on the ancient chart. And even if it did arrive, there was no guarantee that anyone would be there to receive it. The quarantine had been in place for over 400 years. For all anyone knew, the humans had destroyed themselves long ago, but Zethkar had run out of options. The Council's fleets were being destroyed. Their most advanced weapons were useless. The enemy was advancing toward the core worlds where trillions of beings lived in peaceful ignorance of the approaching doom. He began recording his message, choosing his words carefully. If the humans were still alive, and if they were as dangerous as the old stories claimed, then perhaps they were the only hope left. Unknown recipients in the Sol System. This is Commander Zethkar of the Altarian Defense Fleet, speaking for the Galactic Harmony Council. We are facing an enemy that our forces cannot stop. They have destroyed 47 star systems in the past week. Billions of beings are dead, and we estimate they will reach our core worlds within 15 days. He paused, looking out at the stars that no longer seemed peaceful. We know your people were placed under quarantine long ago. We know you were considered too dangerous for normal contact. But we are desperate. Our weapons cannot hurt these attackers. Our shields cannot stop them. They do not communicate, they do not negotiate, they only destroy. Zethkar took a deep breath before continuing. If you are still out there, if you can receive this message, we are asking for your help. We will provide coordinates, tactical data, anything you need. We know we have no right to ask this of you after so many years of isolation. But please, if there is any mercy in your species, help us. He added the tactical data and the coordinates of the next likely target, then sent the message racing across the void toward a small blue world that might hold the galaxy's last hope, as the transmission disappeared into the darkness. Could only wait and pray that the monsters from the children's stories were real, and that they still remembered how to fight. Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, in a facility that officially did not exist, Admiral Kate Morrison stared at the glowing screen before her. The alien message had been playing on repeat for the past 6 hours, and each time she heard it, the weight of the situation grew heavier. The war room was filled with the most powerful people on Earth. President John Carter sat at the head of the long table, his face showing the strain of making decisions that could affect the entire planet. General Rick Hayes, a man who had spent his entire career preparing for threats that might never come, studied the tactical data with intense focus. Dr. Lisa Park, head of the Xenological Studies Division, pointed to the holographic displays floating above the table. Her department had been established 4 centuries ago after Earth's first and only contact with galactic civilization. Since then, they had been preparing for the day when the aliens might return. The translation took our computers 8 hours to fully decode, Dr. Park explained. But the message is clear. They're facing an enemy unlike anything in their recorded history. Based on their tactical reports, we're looking at ships that can destroy entire planets and fleets that number in the thousands. General Hayes leaned forward. What about their own military capabilities? That's the interesting part, Dr. Park replied, pulling up new data. The Galactic Harmony Council has had peace for 300 years. Their entire civilization is built around avoiding conflict through diplomacy and technology. Their weapons are designed to disable rather than destroy, and their military forces are primarily ceremonial. President Carter rubbed his temples. So they're asking Earth for help because we're the only species they know that still knows how? To fight real wars? More than that, sir, Admiral Morrison said. According to our deep space monitoring stations, the energy signatures from these attacks are massive. Whatever's destroying their worlds is using brute force on a scale we've never seen. But their enemy seems to rely purely on overwhelming firepower rather than tactical thinking. She activated another display showing Earth's military assets. Our entire defense doctrine has been built around the assumption that we would face a technologically superior enemy. We've spent 4 centuries developing strategies for fighting opponents with better weapons, better shields, and better technology than us. General Hayes nodded grimly. Mobility, adaptability, and hitting harder than the enemy expects. Might not have their fancy energy shields, but they're built to take punishment and keep fighting. Dr. Park pulled up images of the alien ships from the tactical data. Look at their vessel designs. Smooth curves, artistic flourishes, built for comfort and efficiency. These are exploration and trade ships adapted for defense, not real warships. And their enemy? The president asked. Angular, brutal designs focused entirely on firepower and armor. But according to the battle reports, they fight in rigid formations without adapting to changing conditions. They rely on superior technology rather than superior tactics. Admiral Morrison stood and walked to the large wall display, showing Earth's current military deployment. The 7th Fleet has been running deep space patrol exercises for months. Captain Dan Miller's crew on the U.S. Defiance knows their ship better than anyone in the fleet. They can be ready to deploy within 12 hours.
Ow.
What about the rest of our forces? President Carter asked. The 3rd and 5th Fleets can follow within 48 hours. That gives us 37 ships total, including our heavy cruisers and destroyers. Not a large force by galactic standards, but every one of those ships has been built for war. General Hayes pulled up Earth's weapon specifications. Our kinetic weapon systems are something they've never encountered. While the galaxy moved, 2 energy-based weapons centuries ago, we've continued developing projectile systems, railguns, mass drivers, guided missiles with nuclear warheads. Primitive by their standards, Dr. Park added, but sometimes primitive is exactly what you need. Their shields are designed to absorb and disperse energy attacks. I doubt they've ever faced a tungsten rod moving at 15% light speed. The president was quiet for a long moment, considering the weight of the decision. Earth had been isolated from galactic civilization for 400 years. The last contact had ended badly, with the aliens declaring Earth too dangerous for normal diplomatic relations. Now those same aliens were asking for help. Admiral Morrison, he finally said, "What's your honest assessment of our chances?" Against their enemy? Unknown, sir. We don't have enough data on their capabilities. But against the kind of opponent they've described, one that relies on brute force over tactics, I think we have a real chance. And the political implications? Doctor? Park leaned forward. Sir, this could be our opportunity to rejoin galactic civilization. If we help them defeat this threat, they'll have to reconsider their assessment of Earth as a dangerous quarantine world. Or, General Hayes said grimly, they'll be even more afraid of us once they see what we're really capable of. Morrison spoke up. With respect, sir, that might not be a bad thing. Fear can lead to respect, and respect can lead to peaceful coexistence. Right now, they're desperate enough to ask for our help despite their fears. That gives us leverage we've never had before. President Carter stood and walked to the window, looking out at the mountain peaks above their underground facility. Somewhere up there, normal people were living normal lives, unaware that their planet was about to make a decision that could change everything. How long do we have before their core worlds are threatened? He asked. Based on the enemy's current rate of advance, maybe 2 weeks, Dr. Park replied. And how long to get our forces to their location? 5 days at maximum hyperspace velocity, Admiral Morrison answered. The president turned back to the table. That's cutting it very close. Sir, General Hayes said, there's another factor to consider. Our military has been preparing for this scenario for 4 centuries. Every officer, every enlisted person, every ship captain knows that someday we might have to defend not just Earth, but prove that humanity deserves a place in the galaxy. The crews are ready for this, Admiral Morrison agreed. They've been training their entire careers for the day when Earth would no longer hide in the shadows. President Carter returned to his seat and looked around the table at the faces of his advisors. Each of them understood the magnitude of what they were discussing. If they succeeded, Earth would emerge from its long isolation as a major power in galactic affairs. If they failed, they might all die far from home, and Earth would remain alone in the darkness. Dr. Park, what do we know about the species asking for help? The Altarians are one of the founding members of the Galactic Harmony Council. They're natural diplomats, highly intelligent. According to our old records, they were among the more reasonable voices when Earth was placed under quarantine. If we had to choose aliens to make first contact with after 4 centuries, they're probably our best option. They're desperate enough to ask us for help, despite being afraid of us, the president mused. Yes, sir. Which means they're willing to overlook their fears if we can save their civilization. President Carter made his decision. Admiral Morrison, prepare the 7th Fleet for immediate deployment. General Hayes, I want our best tactical minds analyzing every piece of data these aliens provided. Dr. Park, prepare diplomatic protocols for re-establishing contact with galactic civilization. He stood again, and everyone in the room rose with him. Ladies and gentlemen, Earth has been hiding in the shadows for 400 years. It's time to show the galaxy what humans are really capable of, and God help anyone who stands in our way. Admiral Morrison saluted. Mr. President, the 7th Fleet will be ready for deployment in 10 hours. Make it 8, Admiral. Time is something we don't have much of. As the meeting broke up and the leaders hurried to their tasks, none of them could know that within days the galaxy would witness a form of warfare it had forgotten existed, and that the name human would become synonymous with hope for some and terror for others. Captain Dan Miller stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance as the stars around them shifted from the blue-white streaks of hyperspace back to normal points of light. After 5 days of traveling at maximum speed, they had finally reached the coordinates provided in the alien distress call. The Defiance was not the largest ship in Earth's fleet, but it was one of the toughest, built like a flying fortress with thick armor plating and redundant systems throughout. It had been designed to keep fighting, even after taking damage that would destroy most vessels. Captain Miller and his crew of 38 had trained together for 6 years, running endless combat drills in preparation for this exact moment. Captain, called Lieutenant Amy Torres from the sensor station. I'm reading multiple contacts. 17 ships in defensive formation around that asteroid field. They match the configuration described in the Altarian fleet reports. Miller nodded. Any sign of the hostiles? Negative, sir. Just the council ships. They're broadcasting on the emergency frequency from the original distress call. Put them on screen, Torres. The main display flickered to life, showing a bridge. That looked more like an art gallery than a military command center. Soft curves and elegant designs surrounded tall, graceful beings with pale blue skin and large, luminous eyes. The alien who appeared to be in command looked exhausted, his normally calm features drawn with stress and fear. An unknown vessel. This is Commander Zethkar of the Altarian Defense Fleet. Please identify yourself and state your intentions. Captain Miller stepped forward into the pickup range of the communication system. He was a big man, built solid like most Earth military officers, with scars on his hands from years of training exercises. His uniform was practical gray and black, designed for function rather than appearance. Commander Zethkar. This is Captain Dan Miller of the Earth vessel Defiance. We received your distress call. The reaction on the alien bridge was immediate and dramatic. Several crew members stepped back from their stations, their large eyes widening with what appeared to be a mixture of terror and desperate hope. One of them whispered something in their own language, and Miller's translation system picked up the word Deathworlders. Commander Zethkar stared at the screen for several long seconds before speaking. Earth, he said quietly. Forbidden. World, You actually exist. We exist, Miller confirmed, his voice steady and calm, and we're here to help. What's your current tactical situation? Zethkar quickly activated his own displays, transmitting tactical data to the human ship. Enemy destroyed 49 systems in the past 8 cycles. We've lost contact with 12 of our defense fleets. Our weapons cause minimal damage to their ships, and they ignore all attempts at communication. Miller studied the incoming data, his expression growing more serious. The enemy ships were massive, heavily armored, and equipped with weapons that could crack planets. But more importantly, their attack patterns showed a complete lack of tactical flexibility. Commander, have you tried kinetic weapons? Zethkar looked confused. Kinetic weapons? You mean physical projectiles? Captain Miller, no civilized species has used such primitive methods in over 500 years. Lieutenant Commander Jake Foster, Miller's tactical officer, couldn't hide a slight smile. Captain, I'm reading their ship configurations. Those energy shields are designed to absorb and disperse directed energy attacks. I don't see any provisions for stopping solid objects moving at high velocity. That is because no reasonable species would resort to such barbaric methods, Zethkar said, then immediately looked embarrassed. Forgive me, Captain. I did not. Mean to insult your people? Miller waved away the apology. No offense taken, Commander. We stopped worrying about being called barbaric a long time ago. Torres, what's our ETA on Admiral Morrison's task force? 5 hours and 37 minutes, sir. Good. Miller turned back to the communication screen. Commander Zethkar, I need your ships to fall back to a safe distance. When our main fleet arrives, you're going to see some things that might seem extreme by your standards. Don't try to interfere, and don't try to stop us. What do you mean? Zethkar asked. I mean, we do things differently than you're used to. We don't fight clean wars with rules and honor codes. We fight to win, and we use whatever methods work. Before Zethkar could respond, alarm klaxons began sounding throughout both fleets. On the edge of sensor range, massive shapes were dropping out of hyperspace. The enemy had found them, Captain Torres reported, her voice tight with tension. I count 63 hostile vessels. They're in standard attack formation and moving toward the Council ships. Miller watched the tactical display as the enemy fleet approached. Their ships were huge, angular monsters that looked like they had been designed by someone who understood only destruction. Dark metal hulls bristled with weapon systems, and their formation was rigid and predictable. Commander Zethkar, get your people out of here. Fall back to the rally point we discussed. But Captain, there are only 17 of us, and 63 of them. You cannot possibly, Commander, Miller interrupted, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent his life preparing for this moment. Trust me, this is what we do. The Altarian ships began their retreat, moving with the graceful efficiency their species was known for, but the enemy fleet ignored them completely, focusing instead on the single human vessel that dared to remain in their path. Sir, reported Lieutenant Torres, the hostiles are targeting us. Energy signatures are off the charts. All hands. Battle. Stations, Miller announced over the ship's communication system. This is not a drill. We're about to engage a hostile force. Remember your training, trust your shipmates, and show these aliens what Earth is made of. The first enemy salvo lit up space like a miniature star. Massive energy beams lanced out from a dozen ships, all focused on the Defiance. But Miller had been expecting this. As the beams approached, he ordered evasive maneuvers that would have been impossible for the elegant Council ships. The Defiance rolled, twisted and accelerated in patterns that seemed random but were actually carefully calculated. Some of the enemy fire missed completely, while other beams struck the ship's heavy armor plating and scattered harmlessly. Damage report, Miller called out. Minor scoring on the outer hull, reported Chief Engineer Bobby Walsh over the intercom. All systems nominal. They're hitting us with a lot of energy, but it's not focused enough to penetrate our armor. The Altarian ships, now safely distant from the battle. Commander Zethkar watched in amazement as the human vessel absorbed punishment that should have destroyed it 10 times over. How are they still functional? He asked his sensor operator. Unknown, sir. Their armor is much thicker than anything in our database, and their flight patterns. They're not following any recognizable tactical doctrine, because they're not trying to fight an honorable battle, Zethkar realized. They're trying to survive long enough for their reinforcements to arrive. As if summoned by his words, space around the battlefield began to shimmer as more ships dropped out of hyperspace. First came the heavy cruisers, massive vessels bristling, with weapons that had been designed specifically for ship-to-ship combat. Then came the destroyers, smaller but faster ships that moved like sharks through the void. Admiral Kate Morrison's voice came over the communication channel. All ships, this is Admiral Morrison aboard the UES Vengeance. We have hostile contacts engaged with Captain Miller. All vessels, execute attack pattern Delta 7. What happened next would be remembered in military academies throughout the galaxy for centuries to come. The human fleet didn't fall back to analyze the enemy or attempt communication. They didn't try to match the aliens' firepower with superior technology. Instead, they did something that no civilized species had done in 500 years. They attacked with the fury and determination of a species that had been born on a world where everything was trying to kill them, and they had never learned to give up. Admiral Kate Morrison watched the tactical display from the bridge of the UES Vengeance as her fleet moved into attack formation. The enemy ships were massive, each one easily 3 times the size of her largest cruiser. Their dark hulls bristled with weapons that could level cities, and their energy signatures showed power levels that dwarfed anything in Earth's arsenal. But Morrison had not spent 30 years in Earth's military to be intimidated by superior firepower. She had studied the tactical data from the alien battles, and she could see what the Council forces had missed. The enemy fought like machines, following rigid patterns without adapting to changing conditions. Admiral reported Captain Sue Clark from the destroyer UES Havoc. Enemy formation is maintaining standard attack vectors. They're concentrating fire on Captain Miller's position. Morrison nodded. The Defiance was taking tremendous punishment, but somehow the tough little ship was still fighting. Streams of atmosphere vented from multiple hull breaches. Entire sections of armor plating had been burned away, yet Captain Miller kept his vessel in the fight. All ships, this is Admiral Morrison. Execute Delta Pattern 7. Miller, take your ship in close and paint targets for the heavy cruisers. Roger that, Admiral, came Miller's voice over the communication system. Even through the static caused by battle damage, his tone remained calm and professional. Torres, take us in. The Defiance accelerated directly toward the enemy formation, its damaged hull trailing debris and vapor. Immediately, 3 of the massive alien warships turned their attention to the small human vessel, pouring devastating fire into its path. But instead of trying to avoid the incoming beams, Captain Miller did something that made Commander Zethkar gasp in horror from his distant observation point. He flew directly into the heaviest concentration of enemy fire, using his ship's thick armor to absorb hits that would have vaporized any Council vessel. Targets painted, reported Lieutenant Commander Foster from the Defiance. Admiral, you have firing solutions on all primary targets. From deeper in space, the heavy cruisers, U.S. Vengeance and U.S. Retribution, opened fire with their main batteries. But instead of the elegant energy weapons favored by galactic civilization, they unleashed something far more primitive and terrible. Tungsten penetrator rounds. Each one the size of a telephone pole and accelerated to 15% of light. Speeds streaked across the battlefield as the enemy ships, designed to absorb and disperse energy attacks, had no defense against chunks of dense metal moving at relativistic velocities. The first round struck the lead. Enemy vessel dead center. The kinetic energy transfer was so massive that the alien ship simply came apart, its hull cracking like an eggshell as the tungsten rod punched through armor, bulkheads, and vital systems. Secondary explosions rippled through the dying vessel as its own power systems overloaded. Direct hit on Target Alpha, Foster reported with grim satisfaction. Target is breaking apart. The second and third rounds found their marks moments later. 2 more enemy ships died in spectacular fireballs as their hulls were breached and their reactors lost containment. In less than 30 seconds, the human fleet had destroyed 3 vessels that the Council's best weapons had barely scratched. On the Altarian flagship, Commander Zethkar watched in stunned silence as the humans demonstrated a form of warfare his people had forgotten existed. "They're not even using targeting computers," his sensor operator reported in amazement. "They're calculating firing solutions manually and compensating for movement in real time." "How is that possible?" Zethkar asked. "Unknown, sir. But their accuracy rate is over 90%, even at these ranges." The enemy fleet, faced with an attack method they had never encountered, began to adapt. The surviving ships spread out, trying to present smaller targets and avoid the devastating kinetic rounds. But the humans adapted faster. "Enemy formation is dispersing," reported Captain Clark from the Havoc. "They're trying to minimize the damage from our mass drivers." "Let's give them something else to worry about," Morrison replied. "All ships execute Hammer Protocol." What happened next violated every principle of civilized warfare. Instead of maintaining a safe distance and exchanging fire, the human fleet accelerated directly toward the enemy formation.
Ships that should
have retreated when damage pressed forward, the crews fighting with a determination that bordered on madness. The UES Retribution, trailing atmosphere from a dozen hull breaches, somehow managed to get close enough to one of the enemy vessels to deploy its complement of assault shuttles. Within minutes, human Marines were cutting through alien hull plating with plasma torches and boarding the enemy ship. "This is impossible," Zethkar whispered. "No species fights like this. They should be dead 10 times over." The Marines moved through the enemy ship like a force of nature. Unlike the graceful corridors of council vessels, the alien ship was a maze of dark passages and mechanical systems. But the humans adapted quickly, using demolition charges to blast through bulkheads and fighting their way toward the engine room. Lieutenant Sarah Kim led her squad through a corridor filled with alien defenders. The enemy soldiers were tall, heavily armored beings that moved with mechanical precision, but they had never faced opponents who fought with such ferocity. "Contact front," Kim called out as alien weapons fire filled the corridor. The energy beams scorched the walls around them, but the Marines pressed forward, using their superior tactics and mobility to outflank the defenders. Sergeant Tom Bradley tossed a fragmentation grenade around a corner, and the explosion scattered the alien formation. "Move, move, move!" he shouted, and the squad advanced through the smoke and debris. The alien defenders fell back in confusion. They had been programmed to fight opponents who followed predictable patterns, not enemies who seemed to thrive on chaos and destruction. Meanwhile, in space, the main battle continued to rage. The human ships absorbed punishment that should have destroyed them, yet they kept fighting. They used defiance, now missing half its armor and bleeding atmosphere from countless wounds, somehow managed to cripple another enemy vessel with a point-blank torpedo strike. Captain Torres called out, blood running down her face from a head wound. "We've lost main power to forward sections. Emergency batteries only." "Then we'll fight on emergency power," Miller replied calmly. "Foster, do we still have weapons?" "Aft. Torpedo tubes are still functional, sir." "Then we're still in this fight." Admiral Morrison watched as her fleet tore through the enemy formation like wolves among sheep. The aliens had superior technology and overwhelming firepower, but they had never faced an enemy that refused to give up, refused to retreat, and refused to die quietly. Admiral reported her communications officer, Captain Rodriguez, on the enemy. "Use Thunder is requesting permission to ram the enemy flagship." Morrison smiled grimly. "Tell Rodriguez to hold position. We're winning this fight the conventional way." The conventional way, by human standards, was anything but conventional too. The rest of the galaxy, ship after ship, fell to kinetic weapons, boarding actions, and torpedo strikes delivered at suicidal range. The enemy, designed to fight civilized opponents with predictable tactics, found themselves facing an enemy that seemed to operate on pure aggression and determination. Within 2 hours, the battlefield was littered with the wreckage of 47 enemy vessels. Not a single human ship had been destroyed, though most would require months of repair work. The surviving alien attackers, faced with losses they had never experienced before, began to retreat toward the edge of the system. "All ships, this is Admiral Morrison," came the voice over the fleet communication system. "Let them go. We've made our point." Commander Zethkar stared at the aftermath of the battle with something approaching religious awe. The humans had done the impossible. They had defeated an enemy that had destroyed dozens of star systems, and they had done it with weapons and tactics that most of the galaxy considered primitive. Commander, his communications officer, called out, "The human admiral is requesting—" A meeting. Zethkar nodded slowly. "Put her through. I think it's time we learned exactly what kind of beings we've allied ourselves with."